I'm Jim Csek. Welcome to Need to Know. I'm here with Ian Burns. He's on the line. We're a little bit clunky this morning. We started once and it got clunky. So here we go. We're going to give this another whirl here. Technology. Good morning, Ian.
Howdy, mate. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Traffic flowing in the Okanagan here. And then in Kelowna there, you can see traffic is flowing east to west. I'm stumbling over my words. There you go. Let's start off with 2024 joins 1998 at the top of the list for warmest falls ever in the Okanagan. That's the year I moved to the Okanagan, 1998. So there you go, 1998 to 2024, warmest falls ever in the Okanagan.
Can you remember it
they've been
being
keeping
warm?
records since the turn of the 20th century.
Can you remember it being warm when you first arrived?
Yeah, that year was super hot. Like it was really hot that summer. I think we also went, I can't remember the exact number of days, like 70 or 80 days without a drop of rain. I mean, that's memory, right? So, if somebody wants to go and check that, fact check that, they go ahead, but that's from my memory.
Wow.
And it's getting old, obviously. Hey, um, Tom Dias had something to say about the wall they tore down the other day there. We did that video yesterday, and then here's Tom Dias with a bit of reaction when Kent went to ask him about why the wall came down after 3 years of sitting there. We're going to play that video.
They've got some convincing to do at City Hall. We spoke to the mayor. Tom Dias says that after 4 years, with safety concerns arising and questions raised by engineers about the stability of the wall itself, he's convinced it is time for the wall to come down.
The last one we did give a development permit on, and that development permit was to advance, but for some reason, Mark Anthony's group has decided not to proceed with that development. They had an engineer look at the wall as the way that it stands right now, and there was concerns with regards to its stability and it being safe. We've had situations, I know, with the crane last year where we had somebody climb the crane, and then also the crane sitting there. The scaffolding structure and also the crane have been set up now for 4 years, and it cannot continue to stay there without something actually happening. And at this point in time, Mark Anthony Group has no plans to look at advancing a build. So what they are doing is, my understanding is, what they are doing is they are removing the facade, the outside of the building at this time, and looking at storing it and repurposing it in whatever way they can when they look at advancing on a project sometime into the future.
Okay, hang on.
So there you go. If you want to watch that full video, you can head to KelownaNow.com. The full video is there for you to watch. And you can get the full reaction from our mayor, Tom Dias. Vancouver, a buzz with Taylor Swift. It's just, there's so many events going on. It's like more than just the concert itself. And the next, we have that other slide there. Yeah. The comment from these young girls was that, they're so excited. This is the quote, actually. Breathing the same air as her is kind of cool, but yeah, it's super exciting. I think it'll be more exciting probably in the next couple of days when more people start to arrive. So they've arrived a couple of days early to, get the first to breathe some of that air, I guess. And you and I, before we went on, we talked about Beatlemania. And this seems to be more kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's, the Beatlemania phenomenon has been studied quite extensively, and it's been kind of compared to like outbreaks of religiosity in the Middle Ages and the 19th century and stuff like that. But I think this is in some ways this is even more interesting, isn't it, psychologically speaking or societally speaking, because it's basically uniquely females.
Yeah,
And that's
young
what we were talking
girls.
about earlier, weren't we? The Beatles were everybody.
Yeah.
Absolutely everybody loved the Beatles, and they were critically acclaimed as well as being popular, whereas that isn't true of Taylor Swift. And obviously Taylor Swift is only women or only young girls, really. It is fascinating. Yeah, I'm quite interested in the sort of psychological implications.
It's almost like sports fans, like like your favorite hockey team, NFL team, soccer team. It's very like they really bought into the the feeling, and I think maybe it empowers them to feel good because they kind of like attach themselves to that. Like she's a billionaire singer, right? But it'll be interesting to see over time if her music has the staying power of the Beatles. Still one of my favorite bands, the Beatles.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet on it. That's my opinion.
I'm with you on that one. John Horgan. Sorry, excuse me. A provincial state memorial service for BC Premier John Horgan will be held later this month in Colwood, west of Victoria. Horgan died in November after his third bout with cancer. Will be remembered on December 15th at the Q Center Arena, and it has a capacity of about 4,000. I'm sure it'll be full. He's a very popular premier in British Columbia.
Yeah, and he, when you look at this election that we've just had, it kind of shows how popular he really was, because he dominated, didn't he? He managed to get the NDP an enormous majority, and was loved, or at least there was affection for him on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, I think he did a fine job. And there you go. So if you are so inclined, you can attend the service, and I imagine they'll probably live stream it as well. You would think they would anyway, so to allow more people to be a part
I'm
of
sure
it.
they will.
Yeah. The Mexican president taking a shot at Canada and saying that Canada doesn't have, like the culture that Mexico has, and what we do have is a serious fentanyl problem. That we are the problem with fentanyl, because Mexico gets blamed for a lot, and she's saying stop blaming Mexico, look to Canada.
It's funny because she's new on the block. She was just elected recently, and a lot of people have spoken of her as kind of very dignified and also intellectual, and contrasted her with, among others, Donald Trump. And yet this is almost like beneath Trump. I don't think even Trump would speak in such a vulgar way as this woman. Like, extraordinarily petty, and I would just say infantile, really stupid remarks that this woman has made about Canada's history and how Canada, because that's, if you think about it, she's talking about thousands of years ago. She's talking about the Aztecs and these old civilizations. So in effect, she's not insulting Canada of today. She's kind of insulted the First Nations as like not having any culture. It's just a very, very odd thing to say, and I don't think it does her credit, to be honest.
Canada is losing its place in that North America kind of like trade agreement too. Where Canada had positioned itself at least as number 2, and Mexico's taken over as the number 1 trading partner with the United States. And then even disrespectfully, and a lot of that has to fall on the Liberal government, where we've lost our place in the world. I mean, we are not looked at as a serious nation by many.
Yeah, and that's new, isn't it? I think it's fair to say, but that's new with the Trudeau government. And I struggle. There was a moment where he had some friends on the world stage. Like, he kind of had a bit of a friendship with Obama. He had quite an affinity with New Zealand's former Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, and some others. But it seems now, does he have any friends, really? I mean, that's quite a harsh thing to say, but I don't think he really has any friends.
No.
I don't think anyone really looks to Canada and Trudeau and says, yeah, that's good. I'll have some of that. It seems that his star is fading very, very rapidly, isn't it? It's kind of it's almost sad.
Well, again, if we look at the next one, Canada votes against Israel at the UN, and with Donald Trump coming into power, who is a very good friend of Israel, this again doesn't put Canada in good stead with the United States as well.
Yep, and one of the few countries, I think it was 7 or 8 countries, backed Israel. One of them was the US, as you might expect. So yeah, it's another one of those things, isn't it? But I guess because so few people did go with Israel, maybe Canada thought we can get away with it. The Americans won't pick on us because everybody else is doing it. But it could also have been a good way to have stood out to the Americans, couldn't it, as a friend of Israel?
And then pressure growing on the feds to intervene in the Canada Post strike. it is hurting, like people that want to, like grandmas and grandpas that want to send their Christmas cards out and stuff like that. But, I think they need to find a long-term solution for Canada Post as opposed to just putting a Band-Aid on this thing.
That's what they've said repeatedly. That's their whole rationale. Canada Post, they're saying like we're not fit for purpose anymore. We can't compete with the private companies. We have to change. But the workers have many complaints about that, and they working conditions and that sort of thing.
Maybe it's time
But
to
it's
privatize
a bit
Canada
sad.
Post. Privatize Canada Post like some of the other crown corporations that have been privatized and sell it off to FedEx or UPS or one of those other ones, and to make it like, because it does have a really good logistics thing, and it would add to one of those people, but instead of like becoming a burden to Canadian taxpayers.
Well, the argument from Canada Post, and also from people who are in favor of it remaining as a crown corporation, is that if it were a private company, there's no way that they would deliver letters to like very isolated communities, because that's really expensive and you don't make profit from that, obviously. And I can't imagine FedEx
Excuse me.
would do that kind of thing, or UPS or whatever would get themselves up into the Northwest Territories or something like that to deliver a letter at like, a loss of whatever.
Yeah, but there are deals that are struck like that. I mean, Air Canada and them made deals like that too, where they had to still service certain areas to get rights into stuff like that. So there's ways to make things happen.
Probably if it was to be privatized, it would probably be that would just be funded by the federal government, wouldn't it? Which would
they would just pay for that service, right? So
yeah,
obviously. And then Jagmeet Singh refuses to support the confidence motion that quotes his own criticism of the Liberals. Just proof positive that, he talks a big show about how he's always bashing Trudeau, but when it comes down to it, he does nothing other than support the Liberal government.
Yeah, and what really fascinates me about this is that his polling numbers remain basically unaffected, about 20% for the NDP. It's just like stuck on that number. It doesn't seem to matter what he says or does, or the ways in which he's attacked. He just continues at 20%. So I guess he must think no harm, really, no harm done.
That's why he likely continues to play the game. Like, I mean, he is one of the biggest gaslighters out there. You know what I mean? Talking about how he's looking after Canadian interests while he jumps in his Maserati, and and it's just kind of ridiculous all the time, right? And so he's going to topple the government. He's going to become the prime minister, and it's just silly.
I suppose, in his defense, I'm often in this unenviable position of defending these people, but in his defense, he would say, look at the dental care thing. Look at XYZ. These policies that they're really their policies, aren't they? That they've bullied the Liberals into passing. So in a sense, they can say like, look, we've really achieved a lot with this relationship, and we've exploited an incredibly weak and pretty hopeless Liberal minority. And
did you say
we've
exploited
achieved
Canadians,
a lot.
or did you say exploited the Liberals?
There's an argument to be made, absolutely, that they've exploited Canada, and that's also true of the Bloc Québécois. They went off in a tantrum, didn't they? Because they tried to do the same thing as what the NDP has achieved. They tried to bully the Liberals, but didn't succeed. So they went off in a huff and said, "Okay, we're going to vote to get you out now."
Which again doesn't matter, because as long as they have the NDP in their back pocket, it just doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, and I suppose the Tories, when they sit in there at their round table trying to think of a way to get an election, they must be trying to think, how can we say or do something that will make the NDP supporter base, or even the MPs, go against Singh and actually and split off from Singh and sink the Liberals? But I'm not really sure what that could be. I mean, you might have thought climate change or something like that, because the NDP tend to be really hard on that. But then Singh came out recently and said that he doesn't agree with the carbon tax anymore. So it's a weird relationship, but it seems pretty firm right now.
Yeah. Canada's population ages, healthcare costs expected to surge, and our healthcare is already in a crisis. But as more people age and there's fewer young people, we're going to talk about it later about the birth rate declining all over the world. It's going to get tougher and tougher for like the young people to be the tax generators, right? And then, and then the older people obviously will be the ones that using a lot of the healthcare services. Again, more reason for every person to start looking after their own healthcare, to eat better and exercise more frequently, and look at a better health span as well, because I don't think there doesn't look like much at this point hope on the horizon for healthcare to seem to get better, because we don't see it even in British Columbia here. We see just closure after closure. I think when's that story going up that you're doing on all the closures on hospitals here in British Columbia?
I've given the Ministry of Health a deadline of today, so I'm going to put it online today. They're probably going to try and push me back, but they always do that, and I can't be bothered, so it will go online today.
There you go. And that should be a really good story, in depth on all these closures that have been happening in British Columbia, and there's quite a few of them.
But that is crucial, what you mentioned, and obviously what's covered in this article. This is the future. Unless artificial intelligence or some other kind of technology is going to come and rescue us, the simple fact is that the dependency ratio, which is what demographers call the number of young people basically who prop up old people. So it's a number of young to old, or the younger of active to not active, inactive. That just gets worse and worse, and it's not just Canada; it's the entire world. It just gets worse and worse and worse, and it's obviously going to come to a point where it's similar to Japan, where it's on the verge of like a 1 to 2, and then eventually a 1 to 1 ratio. You can't possibly hope to have a functioning health system with demographics like that. There's just no way. So I think exactly what you said there is right. It's going to come down to people looking out for themselves, really. It's really going to matter. You're going to have to really eat well and exercise, because the health system on current trends will not be there for you. That's my assumption.
We've seen it over and over. We do the stories on it too, where the health system is not there for you. And so another reason not to buy into this GST free snack food items, because like eating all that crap food is definitely not going to help your health. And so we'll talk about that later too. You got a piece on that. The Canadian Global Affairs Canada is warning Canadians in South Korea to avoid demonstration and exercise caution, as that hastily called martial law then was hastily called off, like within 24 hours.
Yeah, it's not a proud day for South Korean democracy. I mean, it's a bit of a, it's not a very comfortable democracy anyway. At the best of times, they've got a lot of military rule in their recent history, and presidents as well frequently indicted and arrested and that kind of thing in Korea. It's you have to remember that in a way, democracy was imposed upon the South Korean people by the American occupation after the end of the Second World War. They were kind of pushed into this. They're still quite new to it, so I'm not overly surprised that it happened. But it's a bit embarrassing, isn't it, that he did it on the evening, and then sort of back down the next day.
Well, yeah, the whatever their parliament voted against it, which is that would be the true test of democracy there, because if he would have ignored that, then there is no democracy, right? So
yeah, no, that is a positive sign, and I think the protests show that there's a real there's real support for the democratic system in Korea.
And that is the lesson that we're hearing in the United States and in a whole bunch of places over there, that the people have the power. They have the power. People have to recognize that they have the power. That vote of theirs is the power. And it has been abused by so many politicians.
Yeah. Well, it's a funny situation, actually. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday, depending on what time it was in South Korea. But like some of the MPs actually had to like jump over the walls and stuff, and they had to kind of like run between soldiers that were trying to stop them from getting into the assembly. And there was only 190 out of whatever 300 and something that made it in there, and they unanimously voted to get rid of it. But
Yeah.
it's quite interesting, that, isn't it? How theoretically, if the soldiers had been a bit more on the ball, they could theoretically have prevented all those MPs from getting in there, and there wouldn't even have been a vote.
So it clearly looks like that president was trying to stop them to even have the ability to stop this martial law.
Yeah, it does look like that. And now he's all sheepish, but I mean, he's almost certainly going to be imprisoned, isn't he? At this rate, impeached and prosecuted.
Danielle Smith making the news. Danielle Smith speaking out, defending Alberta, and she dropped a political bomb on Trudeau. She says, we've tried the carrot, and now it's time for the stick, and that they're going to use the Sovereignty Act to fight Trudeau on his emissions caps on the oil patch. And I think she's going to have a lot of Canadians stand behind her on this one.
Yeah, though Alberta, it's a funny one in BC, isn't it? Sort of like half of BC is sympathetic to Alberta, I would say. The other half is very hostile. And then their biggest enemy is basically Toronto and Montreal in a nutshell, isn't it?
They're all so happy to take the check that comes from Alberta.
Absolutely, they bright high.
How many of them have refused the check that comes from Alberta in transfer payments?
It kind of breaks my heart, like when I see Quebec's position on pipelines and things like that, because Quebec is such a valuable, geographically speaking, it's so valuable to Canada with the St. Lawrence there and access to the Atlantic, and they don't want it, do they? They refuse it, and yet, as you say, the irony is that they are just taking enormous piles of cash.
Yeah, if you want to really show
Alberta,
that you're against something, maybe stop taking the check.
Yeah, that would be a principled position. But in a sense, also, you can't help but respect the Quebecois for the way that they make sure that the arrangement benefits them first. They're very much Quebec first, aren't they?
Quebec has always not been shy about it, saying Quebec first, but then the media seems to lose its mind when Danielle Smith says Alberta first.
Yeah, well, they don't have the language maybe in the history to differentiate themselves the way that Quebec does.
I guess that's what it is. You put a story in here today. It's never been scary to be a politician in Canada.
Yeah, very. I mean, this is again, we say this often, but this is happening all over the place. And obviously, look no further than America, where the soon-to-be president of the United States was shot in the head not very long ago. And then
there was a second attempt as well.
A few weeks later.
Yeah, there was a second attempt, and then
it
would be a completely different outcome if they, like I think it was an inch, like for where we'd be sitting right now, right?
Yeah, well, probably even less than an inch, because it was fractional, wasn't it? And it would have gone into the back of his head there and blown his cerebellum out or whatever is there. But yeah, I mean, it's they use this. You can see there the picture of Jagmeet Singh being confronted. I mean, if you think that was scary from the politician's point of view, then I think you're misinterpreting that situation.
Yeah, because I watched that whole clip. There's two police officers standing right there, and they didn't even move. So there was
that was not scary, and that was initiated by Singh anyway.
Yeah,
he was the one that went up and confronted him.
Yeah, Jagmeet would be the one that would be, if I was a police officer, that I'd be talking to, not the person standing there. Because that person, all they did was say, it wasn't me, it wasn't me, it wasn't me. And Jagmeet bullied and puffed up his chest and looked like he wanted to start a fight because, he's got two cops there that'll finish it for him.
Yeah, that is a poor example from CBC. But they also pointed to the example of, or two examples actually, of Trudeau. I don't know if you can remember. I think it was during the last election when he was kind of like mobbed. And somebody threw like grit or something.
Yeah, some pebbles.
Just like little stones.
Pebbles, yeah.
Yeah, so and obviously there's somebody was charged and I believe convicted of trying to, they smashed down the gates, didn't they? And they were looking for Trudeau to try and attack Trudeau. So Trudeau, the ones with Trudeau are real, I think. They're like, he's had some serious threats against his life. And obviously Pierre Poilievre, his wife has been targeted by that group, Diagolon, I think it is, or somebody that was associated with that Diagolon group, which the Liberal Party tells us Pierre Poilievre is sympathetic towards, which I find a little bit odd. But no, it is a very dangerous time to be a politician because as we mentioned earlier, there's a disconnect between the rulers and the ruled across the world again, but in Canada specifically. I feel a lot of people feel like this government really does not represent them at all. And a lot of
So
people feel like the opposition doesn't represent them either. So there's a lot of
well,
anger
I
out
think there's
there.
a lot of anger for sure, but this in this confrontation, it's a poor example to use because I would think that Jagmeet is the one that really initiated this confrontation and prolonged it. I mean, it's a poor example to use if you want to say that it's never been scarier. Because then we have to look back at Jean Chrétien, and Jean Chrétien ran his own security. He's the one that grabbed the guy by the throat. He got pied and all that stuff, and then somebody broke into his house, and like the cops were in the car eating donuts or whatever.
Yeah, Pierre Trudeau as well was a bit of a sort of bruiser, wasn't he, out and about?
Yeah.
But I guess those days are long gone. But you're definitely right. I mean, I sort of balked at that when I saw the Singh example used, because that was, you could say, obviously somebody shouted abuse at him, right? Okay, that happens. You know, you're one of the
Yeah.
most powerful people in Canada. People are going to shout random things at you in the street. But then he turned around and he escalated, and he almost made it a
Yeah.
physical encounter, and it
If
would
if
certainly have been his fault if it had become a physical encounter.
if that was a bar, that's exactly what it looked like. Him trying to initiate a bar fight. Like he provoked and provoked. And again, knowing that he has two guys standing there, and the cops didn't move. Like there was in the just in that itself, the cops didn't move because they didn't see it as anything other than Jagmeet exercising his authority over the citizen.
Yeah, it has the distinct flavor of punching down, for sure.
Yeah.
That even though obviously a couple of idiots have shouted some abuse at him, yeah, right, okay. So they kind of, strictly speaking, they initiated the engagement, but Singh kind of escalated it to a ridiculous extent, and he's a lucky boy. He's very lucky that
Yeah.
that didn't degenerate into something violent, and that he didn't get hurt in that
I
incident.
mean, they should investigate what's behind. Like, why are people angry? Right? Why are people angry? Why aren't politicians being held accountable? Because that just spills out. That's why the anger is flowing through. That's the frustration.
Yeah, and I think it's also this feeble government, as in, it doesn't have strength in Parliament to do anything really. It has to rely on the likes of Jagmeet Singh to do anything. I think that naturally breeds dissatisfaction among the people, because the government, the people in charge, aren't even getting what they want. Never mind,
Yeah.
the electorate, the people out there, and it's become like a lot of horse trading and a lot of protocol and a lot of kind of what you might argue are kind of like shady deals that we don't, the Canadian people didn't have any involvement in the deal that Trudeau made with Singh before Singh
Right.
killed it off. And I think that makes people upset when they feel like they don't have any real control over politics.
Yeah, that they would say that this is not an elected government. This is a government of convenience by two people that are taking advantage of the way government is formed.
Yeah, and there's no doubt at all that Trudeau is unusually unpopular. He's extraordinarily unpopular as a leader, and all of the polls suggest that he's kind of not uniquely unpopular, but very, very, very unpopular. And yet there he stands. He's still the prime minister, and it drags on. It's going to drag on for another 11 months or whatever by the looks of things.
So let's talk about Trudeau a little bit more. The governments of Canada's new economic measures not being welcomed with open arms by a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, 70% think that both the GST relief and the $250 are, it says here, purely electoral tactics aimed at securing votes. That's not a good reception, is it, to a policy? I'm sure
I,
that they're not
I
happy about this data.
I do think that the Liberal government and NDP really think that Canadians are mostly fools because they've used a lot of disingenuous language and gaslighting, to say taking the tax off groceries when there is no tax on groceries. That in itself tells you that they're not being truthful and honest with the Canadian taxpayer.
Yeah, there's a lot of salesmanship going into this, which is true of a lot of the Liberal policies, and they've been accused of this repeatedly, haven't they? With like the $10 a day daycare, which is, some people argue, is nothing more than a slogan. And you hear this a lot with liberal policies, but there is one line here that might please the liberals somewhat, which is that 18 to 34-year-olds are the most likely to view these measures as helpful. That's a group of people that the Liberals had in the bag for quite a long time and lost to the
I,
Tories in recent polls. So I think they'll be happy about that, about the prospect that they might get young people back on side.
I would say it's a testament to how bad it is and how bad they've made it for that group, though, too, because that to
Yeah, I
make
think they'll just take anything, won't they?
Yeah, to make $250 important to somebody, and that's what they're preying on, and that's in itself is disgusting. You know, like to think that you can prey on Canadians for $250 trinket and use that as a policy that is just based in nothing and costs more than it's worth. And it just, I mean, the numbers have been run by many people, and these numbers don't work.
Yeah, it's well, like this poll suggests that the majority of Canadians think. I also reckon that it's more political, isn't it, than economic.
Yeah, it's silliness. And then we have this chart here from Elon Musk has put it up there, and he's been saying this for a long time, that birth rates are collapsing worldwide, and it's entering into dangerous territories. You know, like there was that narrative out there that, you know, you shouldn't have kids because of climate change and all this stuff, and then just, you know, like it's expensive to have children, as you know, you have two young ones. It's tougher and tougher, but if you look at the fertility rates, especially in the Western world, things are in dangerous territory.
Yep, and people, you know, I understand why Elon Musk has always gone on about this, because he's one of the few people that does raise his voice, because there's not much conversation about it, really, not an appropriate amount based on how serious it is anyway. And then when there are conversations about it, people have what I have to say are quite facile opinions about it, where they just say, "Oh, light's too expensive, houses are too expensive. What do you expect?" kind of thing. And it's like, have a look at Chad, have a look at the economic fundamentals of the African nation of Chad, and then look at their fertility rate. It's not to do with that. It's not to do with that at all. It's not about money. It's something else. It's something much deeper than that.
And if we loop this story back to one of the stories we did earlier, if we don't have enough young people, there'll be nobody to look after the old people. Do you know what I mean? Like there's nobody generating revenue and economic activity to look after the people as they age. Like that in itself is dangerous.
Yeah, it's the death knell for the economy, really, unless the you know, technology comes and saves us. But if anybody is curious, if anybody is like sat there rubbing their chin and saying, why on earth did the Liberals bring in millions and millions of people from overseas? Why did they sort of, as Pierre Poilievre would say, why did they abuse and destroy the immigration system? This is the answer. Look no further. This is why they did it, because there aren't enough young people in Canada to prop up the institutions and the economic system. So they thought, we'll just get them from somewhere else then. That's our only option. So rather than actually address the fertility crisis, they just said, we'll just, you know, somebody else will just make our babies and we'll bring them here. Obviously, that's quite a stupid idea, because most of the people who've come to Canada from India, and if you look at India's fertility rates, they've declined quite dramatically, and they're now at about replacement level. So, not, you know, that's not going to last much longer anyway. India's not going to be producing unlimited people for much longer. And then at that point, what do? You've run out of immigrants then.
So yeah, so this loops us into our next story, and Kayleigh McEnany had a tweet out there, and this shows what was going on, because Donald Trump's plan is to deport, especially the illegal immigrants that are criminals, and then so the Chicago mayor got up and said that he would fight Donald Trump for this, and then a lot of people, residents of Chicago, you can go find this on the internet. We're not going to play this, but a lot of people rose up and said they'll stand with Trump, because they say citizens aren't being looked after, and everybody's prioritizing the immigrants while citizens get ignored, and they've had enough.
And that's the same thing in America, exactly what we just said. Their fertility rate is higher than ours. It's considerably higher, but it's still nowhere near high enough for the population to sustain itself. So they have to bring in, immigrants, and they do it in a very, very underhand way in America, or the American elite does, where they just turn a blind eye really and let millions of people come in over the border.
Yeah. So we're going to play this next clip from Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, the largest city, and we'll play this clip first. Well, we're going to try and play it anyway. Well, you keep trying on it, and because he was saying that that he's going to stand with Trump too and deport illegal criminals, because again, it's cost New York City billions of dollars, and it's hurting citizens of New York. Can you play that? No, we're going to play it.
Those who are here committing crimes, robberies, shooting at police officers, raping innocent people, have been a harm to our country. I want to sit down and hear the plan on how we're going to address them. Those are the people I am talking about, and I would love to sit down with the Board of Czar and hear his thoughts on how we're going to address those who are harming our citizens.
You're open to that?
Open to
hear what their plan is to deport some of these folks, and you think the city, in some circumstances, should cooperate with ICE.
Let me. You know what's interesting? And I was talking to the team the other day. I want you to all go back and Google Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. Google what they said about those who commit crimes in our city and what they said in our country. They said those who commit crimes need to get out right away. That was their position. So this is not a new position, because in the state of in the era of cancel culture, no one's afraid to be honest about the truth. Well, cancel me, because I'm going to protect the people of this city. And if you come into this country, in this city, and think you're going to harm innocent New Yorkers and innocent migrants and asylum seekers, this is not the mayor you want to be in the city under.
So there you go. He's saying, "Go ahead and cancel me," and we're seeing that more and more from many of these cities that were defending this at first, and now they're seeing all the crime and all that, and the citizens of the United States being harmed. And we could say the same thing happening here.
I mean, the fact that it's a controversial position to hold, that an immigrant should be deported if they commit a crime, I mean, that tells you how wacky this era is, really, doesn't it? I mean, that was I'm talking like going back thousands of years. That's been just obvious, that's been a natural, obvious thing to do. Somebody's a guest in your country or even your home, and they do something against the law. They commit some unpleasant deed. Then off they should go. Really, I mean, how is that controversial? But the fact that it's so controversial that it dominates the news cycle in America, I mean, I think that says a lot, really.
We got our meme of the day. They're going to load that up. There you go. There's the meme of the day. And it's our own Chrystia Freeland shopping to, like they're promoting this GST holiday. And she's got a family. The people are saying, has she ever shopped before? Because in her basket, she has one banana and she's got a family. She's got some kids. Like, are they splitting that banana?
Well, at least she's walking past the Pringles there. She's not going to take advantage of that.
Those are the ones that are GST free, because that banana does not have GST on it.
Yeah. No, it is funny. It reminds me, and I said this to you yesterday, it reminds me of Jagmeet Singh's finest hour, where he asked Trudeau if he'd ever been in a grocery store before. Because, I mean, realistically, they don't do much of their own grocery shopping, do they? These kingpins. There
you go. We got the next one here. This is one of the better ones, and this is in a hearing there. This is Pierre Poilievre put this out there. And this is a Liberal MP. Go and play this clip.
3 carbon taxes. I don't know of any carbon taxes in Canada. There is no carbon tax currently in Canada. There is a carbon levy under the Price on Pollution program that is in place. That has gone up consistently every year.
They pay in the areas that have the carbon tax. Or the carbon tax, the carbon tax.
You can cut it off there. So This is what I've been keep driving home. That's basically lying, like bold-faced lying to the Canadian public to say there is no carbon tax in Canada. And they say it like they believe it. Like I don't even know how they can say it with a straight face and say what carbon tax. Like they're making a mockery out of these hearings by saying things like that. By saying, you know, like they spend 15 minutes arguing that there is no such thing as a carbon tax, when clearly every Canadian goes to the gas pump and they clearly see it adding to their fuel prices.
I think it's even worse than the way that you're describing it, because when I listened to that, I heard her say that there is a carbon tax in Canada. She did. She absolutely 100% said that there is a carbon tax. She just used a synonym of the word tax
Right.
and said levy. Does she not
Gaslighting.
know what the word levy means?
Yeah.
It means
Gas,
tax.
gaslighting, just basic gaslighting. And that's what I'm saying. This is what this party is famous for, gaslighting Canadians. And
But if
it's
you're going to
over.
gaslight, you know, like up the quality a bit, I would say. Like do a bit more. Do your homework a bit more rather than using a synonym for the word
Yeah,
that you're
because levy,
that you're trying
levy
to
is
say.
a tax too. Exactly. But, and
Yeah, exactly.
it's
It's
so
absurd.
disingenuous, and it's basically liar, 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 pants on fire, right? And does the media go after them for this?
Well, I don't know, did they? It doesn't look
Well,
like
I
it.
mean, that's what I'm saying. Like they should be going to say, like, you were lying to Canadians. You were sitting there lying to Canadians. One of the biggest issues for Canadians is the carbon tax. One of the biggest issues, and now you're going to sit there and pretend like there is no, but because you're using a switcheroo word, which means the same thing, like you said, and you're going to play this game. Did you see the guy, the moderator there? Like when he looked up when she said there is no tax, he kind of like he's like, what? Like it's almost like a Monty Python skit. You're familiar with Monty Python, right?
Yeah, it is actually a lot like that. It is quite
You
Python-esque.
literally are lying, like bold-faced lying right there, just absolute lying. And if that's what the Liberals would consider a politician of Canada to be representing Canadians, this is what we get.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Python actually. Oh, Python, I should say, because there is actually that scene, isn't there, where you pay money. You pay money to have an argument with someone. Can you remember that scene in Python?
Yeah, I also
It's because
remember that
it's
when
very similar to
crossing the
that, because
bridge.
I could easily imagine John Cleese saying like, "It's not a tax, it's a levy." It's quite absurd.
John Cleese was a master at that. And when they were crossing that bridge there to go get the rabbit, the Holy Grail, you know, and asking about the swallow, right? You know, and if you got the answer wrong,
Oh
you,
yeah.
you were thrown into the abyss. But
Yeah.
Monty Python was like kind of like a wizard at word games, and this is like he would be very proud. John Cleese would be very proud of this comedy routine, really.
Yeah. No, I think that's actually you couldn't have used a better analogy actually, because that really is, it's like word games that are transparently absurd, but they do it with a straight face and they keep doing it, don't they? That's like basically their whole shtick.
So we're a small media outlet, and we're saying these things. Where is our national media outlet that we fund with our taxpayer dollars going after this? Where is the question? Because it's our tax
Yeah, I
dollars
mean,
that should be going after this bold-faced lying.
the only one that I could imagine that would write an article about this or do anything about this is the National Post, like on a national level, I mean. But then the National Post are kind of, regarded as being quite sort of on the fringes, aren't they, by some people, which makes it quite complicated if they're the only ones that are going to do it.
Look at the
And
guy's picture
they're
in
kind
the
of unpersoned.
look at the picture of the guy behind her. I don't know who that guy is.
Yeah, he's probably her dog's body. He's probably like one of her officials that works for her.
I think he's a good representative of Canada when she's saying these things and just like what, like what, like this is what I see from the Liberals almost on a daily basis.
Yeah, well, I also, again, not to put myself into the unpopular position of defender of the Liberal Party, but I think it's not just because it's the Liberals. I think it's something to do with like incumbency. They've been incumbent. They've been in power now for 9 years. The government is absolutely exhausted, not just, literally, but sort of spiritually and intellectually. So their members, their representatives, are now backed into a corner and forced to defend the indefensible. And you see that in a lot of sort of like tired governments where they just can't, they don't have the will anymore, you know, and
Yeah.
you end up getting things like this.
Well, let's call a spade a spade. She's bold-faced lying to the Canadian public.
Yeah, that's a lie. I think that's safe to say that she, well, it is a lie, but it's also like so unbelievably nuts that she lied about it. She issued a deceptive statement or a false statement, said there is no carbon tax, and then her next sentence was there is a carbon tax. So I don't know. She lied and then told the truth. So
Yeah, well, it's because she thinks the words that she used after that don't relate. You know that they relate. I know they relate, but she doesn't think they do, or she thinks the Canadian public is not smart enough to know that they do.
yeah, probably the latter, I would say. But you know, get your dictionaries out, Canadians.
So there you go, Canada. They're betting on your stupidity. That's what they
They're
think of
betting
you.
on you not typing a 4-letter word into Google. I dare you to do it.
Let's move on to markets. Gold, again, chop, chop, chop. And here we are in December, up this morning, up $11 in US dollars, chopping around. You can see the chart there building out. That's a year-to-date chart. You know, the longer it chops like that, the more that it typically will coil upwards, right? Because you see that as things chop down. You can see that in May and May through July, as it chops and then it starts to move, right? So, you know, if you're a technical analyst, you can take a look at that and see that that looks like it wants to move higher, but it doesn't look like it wants to move higher in any swift fashion. And again, the US dollar is really liking the new election of Donald Trump. And so the US dollar is showing its strength. And every time he flexes his muscles with other countries, I think that dollar gains strength as well. Bitcoin. Bitcoin again, chopping a bit there, wanting to challenge that $100,000 mark. I believe we'll see that $100,000 mark before the end of the year. It has a lot of positive headwinds behind it now. They did put a guy in jail there from, I think, and I'm going to get the name wrong, but one of the guys that I think was Celsius. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that, but they did. He got 30 years for frauding, you know, a digital coin fraud there. So. But I can't remember the name.
There's quite a bit of fraud goes on in the crypto world, isn't there? I guess that's because
Sam
they're still figuring
Bankman-Fried
out.
comes to mind with FTX, big scandal there. But you know, Bitcoin itself isn't owned by anybody. You know what I mean? Nobody that know of anyway. So it doesn't have a founder that has created a bunch of coins. It's kind of like it's this mythical creature, Satoshi. So
yeah, people seem to think that it's a Canadian fella, don't they? But he denies that it's him. It's quite a weird origin story, isn't it?
Canadian dollar, again, just chopping in that 71-cent range there. Some Canadian bankers and economists think that it has, I mean, technically it looks weak. If you look at that chart, technically it looks weak and it could go to 60 cents. And that would be painful for Canadians. Very, very, very painful.
Maybe the Bank of Canada will come to the rescue and put interest rates up 3 points or something. That would save the dollar, wouldn't it?
That would destroy Canadians. But hey, they don't seem to care when they jacked it up 19 points.
There's no easy fix, really, is there? That's what I'm implying by that.
We've been talking about the automakers and all the pain they've been feeling, especially in China. General Motors reports a $5 billion write-down in China restructuring charges. And this you're seeing over and over and over again with the big automakers. That includes Volkswagen, all of them. They're just not selling. China, the largest auto market in the world. People don't recognize that, but China is the largest automobile market in the world. And they're buying Chinese EVs at a record pace. And they are like more than half the sales in China are either EV or hybrid, and they're not buying there's fields of vehicles sitting there from Porsche to GM to whatever, and they're closing factories and everything, right? So
that sucks for Canada, doesn't it? Because the sort of US-Canada like automotive complex is based on these old brands, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they're going to have to, like I say, like there's going to have to be some deals made. The strong one in China, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but um, yeah, well, I did stick this in here with, I think I got mixed up, but we'll go out of order here. But Kevin McCarthy's saying that, the United States needs to really move towards space, AI, advanced manufacturing, and really work with the business community. And I think that partnership with, or friendship with Elon Musk really speaks to this. They brought in one of the leading technologists of the world, and now they got other people banging on the door that want to be a part of it too, including Mark Zuckerberg. He said, "Let me in. I want to be on your guys' team." So they're bringing together some of the world's brightest and most successful people into the United States, this government, and saying they want to be part of the solution.
Yeah, well, that's the US playing to its strengths, isn't it? Because they do have a dominant position in the likes of artificial intelligence, yeah, and a lot of other tech.
And space. If you take a look at space, SpaceX and Starlink being the largest global communications company in the world, this launches like so many satellites. And there's military, it's a military contractor. I mean, there's military all over that SpaceX space. And space, like they launch more rockets than I think everybody else combined by 10x or whatever. Like they are leading the way, and then their plans are to go to build a base on the moon and get to Mars within 18 months in an unmanned craft, and then I think shortly after that to have manned craft go to Mars.
Yeah, and it's not an area of strength really for the Chinese, not particularly.
No.
I mean, the Chinese in general haven't done very well in aeronautics, have they? They don't have a aircraft manufacturing company. They never figured it out, did they? They tried and they couldn't figure it out, so they just didn't do it. So I mean,
Elon Musk is a modern day Merlin.
Hey?
Modern day Merlin. Again, from English mythology, Elon Musk is a modern day Merlin, and he wields that stick of technology across like 7 or 8 companies that are all world leading companies. They're not all just like this one's like in the middle of the pack. They're all leading. SpaceX leading, Starlink leading, Tesla leading, Neuralink leading. Like I can go on and on, right?
And certainly, if you mentioned Mark Zuckerberg earlier, and they are often put into the same bracket, aren't they? But I mean, you can't really compare those two people, can you? I mean, Mark Zuckerberg, what verb should I use here? Was inspired by other people to create Facebook.
I got your analogy. I got your analogy right here. We talked about it early on. Mark Zuckerberg is Taylor Swift. Elon Musk is the Beatles.
Yeah, well, Elon Musk. Yeah, Elon Musk. He's much more of a doer, I would say. Whereas Mark Zuckerberg, his most successful brand is Instagram, probably, isn't it, at this point, which he bought off other people.
I mean, Facebook generated a lot of money. I mean, no denying that Mark Zuckerberg built an empire. He's one of the richest men in the world as well.
Yeah, he's a really good businessman, I would say.
Yeah, he understood people, and that's one of the things that you have to understand people and he did that very well and profited off of that.
Yeah, so he's a very astute businessman, whereas I would say Elon Musk is more of a visionary almost.
Yeah,
and I don't mean to say that with I don't mean to sort of like join his fan club or anything, but I just think that that's obviously true. I think the sort of things that he's achieved with SpaceX and Neuralink and companies like that. I mean, you can't compare that to buying Instagram and buying up your competitors and being a really, really clever businessman.
I would say some people would say I'm the president of the Elon Musk fan club, but I look at what he's contributed to society and humanity, and I would say to people, has humanity been better off with what he's contributed? And the answer can only be a big resounding yes. I could use a different word there, but like it is a big yes with solar, with megapacks, with EVs. Like he leads in EVs, like everything, like Neuralink, like he's going to make blind people see and quadriplegics walk, and like I mean that is next level stuff, right? So we got a really cool show to show you though here. We got 900 Tesla owners doing a synchronized light show. This is what Teslas can do. This isn't all like, I do a lot of work. Teslas can do this. So we're going to play this little clip for you. There you go. And I just want to point out that most people don't understand this. Tesla, people say there's no robots out there. Teslas are robots. Look at that. That is not like they didn't take a bunch of engineers. They're capable of doing this. They're Tesla cars, and I drive one. It's a robot on wheels.
And is that snow that I can see on the ground?
Well, it's in Finland.
Well?
I'm assuming that's snow.
Right, because that's quite interesting that they're so popular in Finland. Because one of the main criticisms of them is that they're not as they don't work as well in cold weather.
I drive it to Calgary in the winter all the time, and Vancouver seems to work for me as well. So
maybe that's a bit of a urban myth.
A bit of something. There's some in Ottawa, I bet, too.
Yeah, there's an absolute boatload of them in Ottawa. They're everywhere.
They must park them in the winter, though, hey?
Yeah.
Anyway, and here's another little post here just in our EV section. Tesla China hits new high. So this is while legacy automakers can't sell their cars. They had their record month there for Tesla sales. So people in China love the Tesla.
Yeah, and Elon loves China, doesn't he? That's a funny sort of relationship, because he's very big on China, and yet Trump is quite hostile to China at times. And now that Elon's kind of part of his administration.
I showed you that video today. You didn't get to watch it, and I can't remember the name of the city now. What was the name of that city?
Oh, Shenzhen.
Shenzhen. Like, it was a fishing village, not like in 1980. And if you go search on the internet and go take a look at what that city looks like, go take a look at what their airport looks like and what their subway system looks like. We don't have that here.
That's kind of like basically like the epicenter, isn't it, of the Chinese industrial miracle in Guangzhou. It used to be called Canton. They're like, I think it's the Pearl River, isn't it, or something like that. That's where, like, God knows how much of the world's industrial capacity is based. It's like that is basically the industrial workshop of the world around those parts.
They've lifted their people. I don't know much about China. I don't know much about their political system and all that stuff. But just technology-wise, like almost everybody has a cell phone. Like EV adoption rate is through the roof. Their solar adoption is through the roof. Like they are definitely all buying into technology, and technology is what's lifting their people up. Like if you take a look at that airport and that subway station, like it doesn't compare like to what we have going on here in the Western world.
Well, they don't need to go through 25 years of permitting escapades, do they? In China, it's just like Communist Party says do it, so we're doing it tomorrow.
We definitely hinder ourselves, and hopefully in the United States, that Doge can set an example that the rest of the world can follow, so that we can start getting things done and take some of that red tape and bureaucracy out. There's a cute little video out there that because we heard before Donald Trump was elected that it's the end of democracy, the threat to democracy, and then somebody put, like, if you change the word democracy to bureaucracy, it starts to make sense, and it's quite funny, because then it starts to make sense, right? Threat to bureaucracy, and
but it's also what is one of their favorite phrases. The Democratic Party is rule of law. They absolutely love that phrase, don't they? And then the leader of the Democratic Party just did something very nasty on the rule of law, didn't he? He just he just tarnished the rule of law, and he humiliated all of his followers as well.
And they're having a tough time reconciling the ones that are honest anyway, and then the other ones are just like too far gone, right? They just need to be in that place where they can breathe the same air. That's what they're doing, right? Breathing the same air.
Yeah, maybe, but I just think it's astonishing.
Before we go, before we go, we're going to plug this book again. We're going to start selling this pretty quick here. Custom covers as well. And this one I made for my lovely wife. So you've got your spirit animal in here. It has all your kind of like based on like a planner for your year with AI. We've created the cover and your numerology, astrology, and the zodiacs and all that kind of cool stuff. And it even gives you your theme song. This one is like there's a couple of them there, and to get you going for a better 2025. So that was a plug for the book that both Ian and I kind of co-wrote. So there you go.
Yeah, and it should be popular in China as well, shouldn't it? With that spirit animal thing, they're quite big on that in China.
Should be popular everywhere. And you know what? Our promise is we won't lie to you and tell you that if by using a different word that it's a different thing.
Yeah,
Like,
we try and use plain English. And
like a ball,
on that
like
note as well,
telling somebody that a ball's not a ball, but it's just a spherical object. How's that?
yeah. On that note, though, I would say a sort of plug for ChatGPT, which I've trained my ChatGPT to speak in plain English and simple English. And I was thinking when I did that, I just wish that you could do that with politics and our politicians.
Mm. Did you ask it if levy is a tax?
Yeah, I'm sure it would be fast to answer that one. But you know, sometimes it can fall into as people can, like many educated people fall into the trap of using like 4, 5, 6 syllable words because they think that that's the proper way to speak and write, even though in the process they're making their thoughts more difficult to understand for themselves and express. So they just end up muddling whatever it is they're trying to accomplish, rather than just speaking in plain, ordinary.
Yeah. How about I give you a
English.
little kiss here? Keep it simple, stupid.
Totally. That's I agree completely.
There you go. We'll leave you with that little kiss. And we thank you for watching Kelowna. Don't forget to subscribe. And we're on every morning, 5 days a week. We're on YouTube as well. We're on X, Elon Musk's platform X. We're also on, we'll put a piece of it on TikTok. And it is on Kelowna Now in our CMS every morning as well. And again, we thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news, we live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.